Systems engaged. Frequencies synchronized. Prepare for incoming transmission. Coming to you from somewhere in the multiverse, this is Robots from Tomorrow. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and as always your podcatcher of choice. For the full archive featuring over 800 episodes of comics and comics-friendly content like interviews, book discussions, and freeform tomfoolery, please go to robotsfromtomorrow.net. Here is your host, Greg.
Hello everybody, welcome to Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg, glad to have you with us. It's Sierra Barnes Week here on Robots from Tomorrow, as Volume 2 of the collected editions of her ongoing webcomic Hans Vogel is Dead is being released from Dark Horse Comics. We'll be posting a new interview with her on Friday, but today we're shining a spotlight on our 2023 conversation, now in Robots Remastered format. One of the benefits of being associated with a site like the late great Multiversity Comics was the opportunity to discover and talk to creators I never would have otherwise. Sierra is definitely someone I found out about through Multiversity, and then a gentle, "you have to check this out" from Robo-Consigliere Sam Tier put the wheels in motion, and I am so glad they did. Because as you're about to discover, if you don't know already, her work is fantastic, she's got opinions and facts to back them up, and she's not afraid to share them. We talk about the long road and getting Hans Vogel out of her head and onto the screen and now the page, the differences between mythology, folklore, and history, how she learned to stop worrying and love the art of lettering comics, what tales scarred her for life, her take on the age-old question Walt Disney threat or menace, and the time Pele won World War II. Seriously. Now, it's not essential that you listen to this interview before Fridays, but I think it is essential that you listen to both of them, because even though they're almost 3.5 years apart, they really do complement each other pretty well. There were multiple points in the 2023 interview where Sierra mentioned some bit of research or an idea percolating that becomes a big talking point in the 2026 interview. Big enough talking points that they overlapped without me consciously pulling loose ends from the 2023 chat to bring up in the 2026 one. I really love the evolution we see in these two episodes, and honestly that applies to both sides of the microphone. So, do yourself a favor and sit back, relax, and enjoy this earlier chat with cartoonist Sierra Barnes about the first Hans Vogel collection, now with better audio, smoother editing, shorter runtime with no content loss, more bang for no bucks required. What more could you ask for? What we're doing here today is talking with a cartoonist whose work combines such varied influences as history, folklore, mythology, fascism, anti-fascism, war, and foxes that might not actually be foxes. Her webcomic exploration of these topics, Hans Vogel is Dead, was just announced within 48 hours or so of our recording this as having its first volume of strips collected with updated content by the folks over at Dark Horse Comics. She has degrees in history, German studies, as well as an MFA in comics from California College of the Arts, all of which she uses to bring every page of Hans Vogel is Dead to life. Yay, what a horrible pun, couldn't resist. Thanks to friend of the show Samuel Tier's suggestion, I have checked out her work and knew I had to have her on the show to dive into that work and these topics. She is Sierra Barnes, and she is joining us today. Sierra, how are you doing?
Thanks, Greg. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you. I feel so impressive.
Well, I had a lot to work with, looking at the book and looking at, your CV and everything. And I was like, man, trying to get all that into a concise, it's a challenge, but you know what? I accept these challenges as part of the job.
Well, not being concise is something that my editor has accused me of before. So fair enough.
Yeah. But you're creative. Your non-conciseness gives us pages and pages and pages of wonderful comics. So I'm not going to count that as a bad thing. Before we go off on one of the several breadcrumb trail tangents I've written down in front of me, let's not bury the lead here. Can you give us the Hans Vogel pitch and how it made its way from your head to Dark Horse Comics?
Absolutely. Oh, man, that is truly an Odyssey level tale. Hans Vogel is Dead is the story of Hans Vogel, who is a German fighter pilot during World War II who gets shot down and killed during the Battle of Britain. And when he wakes up in his afterlife, he realizes that everything he lived for turns out to be horrible, and it's coming for this new afterlife. So he has to unpack all of the fascism that he learned during life growing up in immediate post-World War I Germany. It does this through fairy tales in a very post-war German literature fashion. If you know about The Tin Drum or Gert Leidig's Payback, these are all very influential in writing it. I went on sort of a bender in undergrad and wrote a bunch of post-war surrealist German fiction, which is why this book is so hard to pitch. I'm like, you guys know about post-war surrealist German fiction? No?
Who doesn't?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you should. It's fun and weird, and fun is a weird word to describe it, but it sure is weird. But my point is that there's a long history of using folklore because it has a lot of national and capital R romantic elements to it to unpack that same nationalism and fascism specifically. And I wanted to be a part of that. And things that interest me, folklore and history and anti-fascism are very much top tier concerns that I had. I started writing this. It's the journey of Hans Vogel. My first iteration was when I was in high school not to date myself, but in 2010. My original idea was that Hans was a Hessian who gets lost in the American Revolution and gets sort of adopted by a bunch of Pennsylvania Dutch and kind of has to like figure out what's going on. That got dropped very quickly because I was like, this isn't weird enough for me. And then I was in undergrad, studied a lot of German literature, Holocaust studies. Shout out to William and Mary's fantastic German department. Did a lot of history, did a lot of interwar history, did a lot of war history. Graduated, was in Austria for a year on an English teaching scholarship, Fulbright scholarship. Did a lot of research there, asked a lot of people's grandmas what their favorite fairy tales were, totally trashed my German accent. I stayed in like a very rural town, just tiny town in Upper Austria. Shout out to Baumgartenberg, population like 200.
Nice.
It was great. I'm pretty sure I had to stay in an 11th century monastery because they had nowhere else to put me. I'm very sure it was haunted, but none of the ghosts hung out with me. So rude. I tried to hang out with them. They were all ignoring me. But it was the centennial of World War I when I was there. And also it was a very exciting political scene, is putting it nicely. The right was on the rise. And I was like, well, you know what? Here's this weird webcomic idea I've been keeping in my back pocket for a while. So let's pull that out and give it a shot. So when I came back to the States, I started drawing it. And it was just a weird webcomic project because I was like, here's my weird webcomic about a dead Nazi. That doesn't get much more niche than that. So, you know, whatever. And
I mean, you probably can find more niche, but there aren't a lot of copycat stories of that nature. Anyway, please.
It's weird. And I don't think I could have pitched it raw, as it were. So I started in 2015. The first volume ended in 2020. And I was just, chugging along, updating on various websites. Has its own website now, hansvogelisdead.com. And 2020, I was pitching it around and it got picked up by Cast Iron Books, which is a small indie publisher in the UK. And they released a hardcover version last year. But unfortunately, they were not able to get US distribution. So last year, they were like, you might want to find another publisher. So I went, oh, crap, and pitched it around again. And fortunately, my absolute dream publisher, Dark Horse, was game for my weird little project. So I don't know if Hans can ride a horse, but he's on the big Dark Horse now, and they picked up all 3 volumes.
Nice.
So in 2025, volume 2, and 2027, volume 3. So knock on wood for those deadlines. Yeah, I'm ecstatic. I remember being little and reading Hellboy, and just getting way too into Hellboy as a kid. I don't think my parents knew what was in Hellboy. Otherwise, I don't know if they would have let me read it as young as I was reading it.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I was like, yeah, there's weird, gross dead bodies. There's Rasputin.
Yeah.
We're beating up Nazis. He goes to hell.
Yeah.
It's great. I was into it in a way that I didn't get into the superheroes really. So that was sort of like a way for me to get into comics that wasn't necessarily the capes. I found that a lot more engaging and into my folklore and weird history takes.
I think it's safe to say folklore plays a part in Hellboy's milieu. It's an interesting book because Mignola does combine Jack Kirby punch 'em up stuff with a moody presentation. The thing that always jumps into my head, I don't know if this was the first Hellboy I ever read, but the Wolves of St. August.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like, oh, Hellboy's going to go on another adventure. And then there's a
There's an
werewolf
abrupt
girl that she's
tone
like,
shift.
yeah, you're like, oh,
Oh,
wow.
oh,
Okay, we're
dang.
doing this. All right, let's go. So, yeah, I can see Hellboy being a gateway drug for many people, but you especially. So, that's a huge odyssey for this particular project. Let's unpack that a little bit. What came first for you? History or comics/drawing?
Okay, I would say
Maybe history or art.
there.
Let's go with art.
Yes, I've always been interested in history since I was a little kid. I've always been interested in art since I was a little kid. I was very fortunate in that my parents were very encouraging me to do both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
My mom is actually a fine artist, so she let me play with all of her fine art supplies as long as I didn't touch whatever she was working on. So I had access to probably pretty expensive colored pencils that I did not appreciate at a young
Mm.
age. But I sort of always drew and I had an interest in comics. My dad was an army brat and he had old copies of Asterisk and Obelisk and Tintin that I would
Mm-hmm.
read. Those were also my gateway drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in, high school, middle school, webcomics were really taking off. So now I suddenly had my public library, of course, and I spent a lot of time there. But now I had this access to the comics of the internet that, frankly, were a lot weirder than things that were being published. So
Right.
I was getting absolutely lost in the sauce with like Gunnar Krig Court, and gosh, there's like so many that are, of course, been taken down, but the work of like Ann Zabla and like Hermione
Mm-hmm.
Yee and like just these fantastic artists from around the world sort of doing things that my tiny little brain couldn't imagine, that I'm like, oh man, doing a webcomic is like the coolest idea ever. Not that I could ever do that, but that's my dream.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that was like an early dream of mine to do a webcomic, but I never really like considered. I was like, that's like a no one in real life does webcomics or like makes
Mm-hmm.
comics. Like, I'm gonna get a respectable job. I'm gonna get my
Right.
degree in history and I'm gonna do all my Germanistic. I'm gonna like I did a lot of
Yeah.
technically don't have a minor in Slavic studies, but I had enough credits to do so because I just
Mm.
didn't sleep during undergrad. Um I didn't sleep. There was too much to do and exciting things to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna go into government because that's what everyone does at William and Mary's. I'm gonna go into intelligence or I'm gonna become a
State
diplomat or
Department.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't do that. I went on. I
Spoiler
went on
alert.
the,
That didn't happen.
yeah. Spoiler alert. That didn't happen. I tried to do a scholarship in researching post-Soviet Cossack identity in Donetsk, Ukraine, in 2014, which like 2 weeks after the scholarship was awarded, they were like, just kidding, Russia invaded. So like, no, you're
Yeah.
not going. So that's why I was in Austria. Well, that's not why I was in Austria, but why I was in
Yeah.
Austria instead of Ukraine. So that was destiny changing tracks, I guess.
Yeah.
But while I was in Austria, I was just taking notes on everything. I went to every World War memorial in every town that I went to and like did a ton of hiking. I took a ton of pictures. I got a dirndl because that's what you wear to formal occasions and
Mm-hmm.
probably doesn't fit anymore, but I would absolutely wear dirndls all the time around here. They're great. I appreciate a dress you can go hiking in. That's respectable.
Yeah.
Had a ton of fun, learned a lot, asked a lot of people as kindly as I could, The question in German is, "Und was hast du in den Krieg gemacht?" What did you do in the war? Which is sort of in itself like a a phrase. I studied in Trier for a semester and stayed with a very lovely older host mom who's like father and uncles were in the Wehrmacht and one was in the SS. So that was an awkward conversation.
Ooh.
Yeah, her mother was still alive and she wouldn't talk to me for weeks because she thought I was Russian for some reason. And when I finally convinced her that I was not in fact Russian, was in fact American, she was just like, well, the Americans did bad things too. And I was like, ma'am, like, you're a gajillion years old, but I'm not gonna have this fight with you. Like,
Yeah.
you're clearly spoiling for a fight, but like,
Yeah.
Okay, but I took a ton of notes, and it was intriguing to me seeing how people who didn't live through it handled this historic trauma on all
Hmm.
sides. The war is a trauma, including World War I, the interwar periods, because there was a lot of violence and political violence during the interwar period and World War II. And certainly, though those wars, for the most part, weren't in living memory anymore, there was a cultural memory and sort of how
Hmm.
people were processing that cultural memory, how people were processing these stories, these narratives as that generation dies off, especially since there's a rash of World War II movies coming out that sort of has an acceptable narrative about World War II. And with
Hmm.
the centennial of World War I coming out, World War I movies and World War I media is cautiously coming back into a mainstream, but noticing sort of how these wars are portrayed differently, it's something that fascinates me. I love picking apart war media. I have tons of hot takes about everything. There was that rash of like, there was like a year period where there were like three movies about Dunkirk, and I'm like, Dunkirk
Hmm.
was a huge mistake on everyone's part. Like, that was a tragedy, a huge
Yeah.
failure on the part of the British government. It was a huge failure on the part of like the Nazis were being stupid,
Hmm.
thankfully, which was the point. If you read Norman Ohler's Blitzed, which is about drug use during the Third Reich, fascinating book. Researching it a lot because pilots, well, as you will read in Hans Vogel, on a lot of drugs almost constantly. But basically, the Blitz was so successful because of how much meth was used, and nobody was really prepared for how far you could go if you didn't need to sleep. So the Germans were constantly running into the problem of outrunning their communication and supply lines, which is what
Hmm.
happened at Dunkirk. Is they had to stop because nobody knew where anyone was, and so they were all trying to sort of regroup while the British were trying to get across the channel. So
Hmm.
just hugely embarrassing. But I'm like, it's
Yeah.
interesting that three movies are coming out about this within like a same year period. What are we trying to say about this in 2020, whatever, 2019? I don't remember what year it was,
Yeah.
whatever. But we're almost 100 years out. This is the point where the living memory people are starting to die off, and
Hmm.
the people who have a stake in controlling the narrative are starting to step up. And what people say about, especially World War II, which is a highly, although people sort of see it as the good war, it is a highly politicized war. And we can see in Ukraine today how it's being used to enact violence and genocide. So I do think that being aware of how this war is used narratively is important, because we can't just be like, yeah, we were the good guys because we were on the side of the Allies and we did nothing wrong. That's not,
Yeah. You may not want to go
yeah.
poking that bear, talking about an earlier history passed down to people who didn't have a living memory of it, but have these tales from folks. The overlap of folktale and history and that is something that is both fascinating in terms of what you're doing in Hans Vogel and stuff. What's the difference between folklore and mythology?
Oh, that's a great question. And this is going to be like my personal opinion. I can't
Hmm.
speak for the folklorist community at large. I would say that folklore is a subsection of mythology, in the sense that mythology is sort of a greater cultural knowledge, and folklore is sort of a specific generative part of it, in that it is
Hmm.
actively, constantly being created by das folk, the people. One of the things that kind of makes me cry a little bit on the inside is you get a lot of people looking for the or fairy tale, the original version of Hansel and Gretel or Red Riding Hood or whatever. And
Hmm.
somebody comes out with a new fairy tale remake and they'll go, well, in the original version, it's like, we don't know which one was original. And also it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like
Yeah.
it's these stories happen because there's a core of emotional truth, or perhaps a core of literal truth, that resonated with people, and people keep embellishing it, or they keep refining it, or they keep doing all of the above and gradually turning it into a story. One of my favorite things about Jürgen Hubert, who is a folklorist on Twitter, who I greatly like, he's been very helpful with pulling up sort of the more non-grim collected fairy tales. One of
Hmm.
one of the things that I've learned from reading his work and his translations of these fairy tales is that a lot of German fairy tales I wouldn't actually classify as like a story
Hmm.
necessarily. Like, you can tell the Grimm ones that most people are familiar with are usually from the third edition of the Grimm's fairy tales, because the first two were deemed not safe for children. The first one was just an academic paper. It was essentially a linguistics project that the Grimms were collecting these fairy tales because they wanted to study the dialects of the various places where they were going in Germany. And then the second one, they were like, oh, people actually want to read these and stuff. And then after the second one was published, the Pope wrote them a letter and said, hey, people are reading these to their kids, and that's kind of messed up. You guys got to like tone it down a little bit. So the third edition has most of the versions that like we know and love today. Brothers
When the
Grimm,
Pope is like, yeah, dial back,
guys, whoa,
the creepy imagery and everything, because it's really freaking people out. That's saying something.
That's exactly. Yeah. So that's when you know that you got to do something. These stories are hundreds of years old. My favorite example is of memory to mythology to like folklore is the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Mm-hmm.
We know there was a guy in Hamelin with a pipe who at least was accused of stealing a bunch of children, because we have a bunch of letters from the Bishop of Hamelin going, where the hell are these kids? There was an incident that was recorded about this. We don't know how much of it reflects the fairy tale, but we know that the same thing with Dr. Faustus. We know there was a Dr. Faustus and he was claiming a lot of stuff, but like Goethe found it romantic enough that he wanted to revolutionize literature by writing his play about it. And Marlowe, I guess, shout out to my boy Marlowe. People will be mistaking you for Shakespeare, and I'm sorry about that. Really, really sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there are any hard lines between mythology and folklore. I do think there's sort of a bit of a graphic novels versus comics element to it, in that I think that mythology has sort of a more important air about it. There's sort of almost a religious connotation, because it implies sort of, I wouldn't call the Greek myth folklore necessarily, because I do think that folklore sort of implies a more cohesive storytelling. I'm not sure. It's vibes, really, is what it boils down to. I think it's vibes.
History seems to share a lot of the same aspects as folklore and as mythology. Tales that are passed down over the years, and I guess maybe history happens to have a certain preponderance of evidence to be able to point back to and say, this isn't folklore because we can prove X, Y, and Z. Does that make any sense?
Yes. So when I was in high school learning German for the first time, my little high school mind was blown when the German word Geschichte means both history and story, like a narrative. And that realization just sort of sent me on a life path. It's like
head
the clouds
exploding.
Had it. My head exploded. I was like, whoa. So essentially, I think that there's sort of an element of, and history starts to get really messy once you start to get anywhere near it, really. There's always an official narrative of what happened, trademark, and that tends to be for ease of access. You can say the Allies won World War I. That's a historical statement. But as soon as you start getting in, there's a lot of like, well, okay, so Russia collapsed and Russia was an ally, but like, did they win World War I? I don't know. Well, there's like a lot of, Germany was really successful on like a lot of their fronts, but they lost the Western front. So there's a lot of war. Did World War I even end? My spicy take is that the world wars are one war that's connected, but that's a different conversation. So my point is that you have to have the opportunity for multiple truths to exist, because you can certainly have people's personal experiences that contradict the major, I guess, narrative of history that are still true and happened. However, do not disprove the large narrative. If one German guy and one Roma guy are friends in World War II, that personal singular experience within that guy's memory can be true. However, all of these things can be true at the same time. I think that it's complicated. That's like the easy answer is that
it's complicated.
It's messy. There will always be a version of Little Red Riding Hood that some people say is the definitive one, but the one the Brothers Grimm recorded the first time, it might not be, the one that Perrault found. Like it's messy. And that's why I love it. I love that this weird, messy realm of people having experiences.
Storytelling and mythology and folklore, obviously it's something that humans created. Do you think we're smart enough to be able to handle the power in it.
This
I
is
sort of
so
came up with that
esoteric.
question kind
I
of
love
like,
it.
I don't even know if that makes sense, but I feel like
I think that
some days I feel like we are, and some days I feel like we're not.
that's a messy question too. And this is just speaking for me personally. I feel like as a storyteller, I have a moral responsibility to try and make sure that the story that I'm telling is something that I think makes the world a better place. And that's certainly like, I'm not projecting that onto other things. There's certainly media that I don't like, and whether or not people have the responsibility to create.
I don't
Yeah, I
even
mean,
necessarily
it's
mean as like a creator. I mean just like us
yeah, just like
in
us
general, because
as a
narratives
species.
narratives seem to be able to spin out of control, and the same narrative can be used in so many different ways based on
Yeah,
like how somebody sort of perceives it. And I don't even really know if there's a question in there.
whether or not we can sort of handle it or control it is irrelevant because that requires us to have a choice. And I don't think we have a choice.
Right.
I think creating narratives is part of the human experience
Right.
and we can't exist without it. That's just it, baby.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. I think your use of Germany in this story is really interesting. And you probably really couldn't do this story without Germany. But thinking about it, I don't know if people understand how young Germany is as a country. Germany, as we think about it, really doesn't start until like the 19th century. And so it's kind of constructed off of the work that the Brothers Grimm did for like their particular things. And then, of course, a lot of the mythology of Germany built off of that. And of course, Wagner being brought in to sort of build this idea.
That guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe in the pit, Wagner.
The
Yeah.
problematic is saying it mildly. So it is this interesting combination of people that have such a long history and yet something created like essentially just before Hans Vogel's lifetime. So he is being fed a lot of this propaganda, and it builds him to who he is, but then also coming after the First World War, obviously that was such an event, and like it's almost the overreaction after that kind of really fed into the Second War.
A
And there,
little spoilers for next book. We kind of go into that more of like Hans's personal identity as sort of a reflection of a German identity that is very much being created in real time. Hans is an armistice baby. He's literally born on November 11th, 1918. And he feels very normal about it. It doesn't affect his life at all. That's a lie. His dad is a World War I vet. He was in the
yeah,
Freikorps, which was a paramilitary organization that was operating in Germany and the Baltics during the interwar period because he just couldn't get enough of the war. His dad's a real piece of work. And we see more of him and how he ruins his son's life later. And his mom sort of, in a better time, his mom would have left his dad and done okay for herself. But in a lot of ways, the whole family is sort of trapped in this unhappy state, and Heinrich, who's Hans's dad, is thrilled about the Nazi. He's not actually allowed to join the Nazi party at first because as a member of the Freikorps they were considered too radical. So that's like a cool fun thing.
The Nazis think you're a little too far to the
when the Nazis
whatever.
are like, well, that's enough. That's a little too much. You can't join our club. Hans is sort of stuck in the middle of being a kid who is desperate for friendship, for connection, sort of a, quiet, nerdy kid, and being stuck in a world where the only thing that he's being rewarded for is hurting people, which is something that he wouldn't, normally do. And the friends that he makes that we hear more about, Fritz Hanau, who is half Japanese, he sort of sees how Fritz is treated. And Fritz is a party hardliner because he thinks that if he can be a good enough Nazi, people will look over the fact that he's half Japanese. Yeah. And his friend Uli Brecher, who's sort of a very upper middle class Bavarian who is blonde and blue-eyed and knows that he can get away with a lot of things, who is queer, and he takes advantage of his dad's status and his money to get away with not being super open, but being open enough.
Yeah.
And sort of those three, I can't wait to get into more of them because I think that like they're self-destructive in a very specific way, and they're all kids. I mean, Hans
Mm,
is 20 when he dies, so these are all just a bunch of messed up kids who are coming of age in this incredibly turbulent time. And that's
mhm,
not to excuse them. There are certainly a large number of kids who are that's the whole point of the story is not to excuse any of them. It's to
mhm.
say, any one of these people, whether or not you like them, could be a war criminal, and maybe you could too. So, like, think about where you are. I know that everyone grew up with sort of Nazis as this jackbooted Indiana Jones villain, but
Mm,
the thing is that America, like, fascism is a tricky devil that shows up differently everywhere that it comes, and that's something to keep in mind. I mean, people who think that it's going to look the exact same here as it does in Germany are wrong. That's not how it works. And sometimes, they conveniently wear armbands and whatever, and that's like, well,
yeah.
okay, that's. But a lot of the times, there are people there are a lot more sort of Mitbegleiterin. There are people who went with it instead of, they weren't necessarily, on the front lines, but yeah, maybe they like made ammunition at home, or they stamped papers, or they upheld the regime in a bunch of little ways. And that's
Mhm,
sort of what I'm trying to chip away at, is this myth of the good German TM, and sort of how that hides a lot of responsibility from individual people, and sort of reflecting on that, and how Hans can realize that he's done bad things, and he's believed bad things, and his things have hurt people. I mean, he's literally killed people. He's a fighter pilot.
mhm.
He shot people down. And he
Yeah.
has this complex about, like, one of the reasons he joins the Air Force is that he feels like if he shoots down a plane, it's not like he's actually killing anyone, because
Yeah.
they can parachute out or they can survive. He never looks at anyone after he shoots, because he doesn't want to see whether or not. And that's sort of like a microcosm of his, like, he
Yeah.
wants to keep his head down and do what he's supposed to do and receive that positive attention.
Acclaim and the medals and all
Yeah,
that stuff, but
but on some level he knows what he's doing is not good, and he can't handle that. So
yeah.
him dying is him being forced to handle that he is actively hurting people, and that more on that with his relationship with Reinica and some of the other characters that we meet. But yeah, he's gotta change. He's gotta do something about it.
Yeah.
This isn't like a redemption story where someone comes down and it's like, Hans, you get the good boy award.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You're denazified. You're a real boy now.
Yeah.
It's
When the
he's a
Valkyrie
messy
shows
guy.
up, it's
Oh
not
yeah.
like, oh, here's your ticket to Valhalla. We've got the beer steins filled. Thor's been asking about you. Let's go. She's like, nah, son, this is not good. Yeah. Maybe dying is the best thing that can happen to Hans Vogel, or at
Yeah.
least the first death, I guess.
Yeah. Being taken out of that
Yeah.
situation is, and
So
I love Brunhilde. She's the best. Yeah.
that's an interesting visual you came up with her, because you're expecting long tassels, the helmet and spear and stuff. That's not what we get.
So I did a lot of research into Valkyries as a
Mhm,
mythical concept. I got spicy takes on Valkyries for days. But one of the things that we'll see in volume 2 that I'm working on right now is that he was talking about Wagner earlier, and Wagner, my man, first of all, he can meet me in the pit. I'll fight him any day. But this is sort of my revenge fantasy on Wagner. Siegfried
mhm.
does show up. We do have Siegfried. He and Brunhilde are exes, and it's messy. And I definitely was like, you know what? I know Brunhilde like sets herself on fire on his funeral pyre or whatever, but that's dumb.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that. I
yeah,
want to have cool Brunhilde, who is Odin's daughter and the chain of fetters. She gets her own sacrifices. She's a badass. But what do you do if your whole hundreds of years of existing, you're carrying these dudes off of battlefields? Like,
yeah. You were gonna stop giving a shit, like,
yeah.
really, really quickly.
And
You're
you're
like,
gonna
this
start
is
having opinions about why they're
yeah,
dying on those battlefields.
good stuff. So if you have story ideas, your own thoughts, you have all of this research. How do you not make us feel like we're paying for your history degree in the work?
I mean, I think about how I enjoy reading history. I certainly enjoy getting into the nuts and bolts of it as much as the next person does. But what I really love it for is the narrative. So I sort of see it as like carving a block of marble, which is something that I don't think in 3D. So all respect to
Mhm,
carvers out there. But you start out with this huge block of information, essentially. That includes the narrative, that includes fun facts that I looked up. I listened to a lot of podcasts on history, lectures on history. There's some great historians who have been very helpful on various social media sites where I go, hey, I read your book, loved it. Anyway, do you have any information about incredibly specific things happening from like April 1940 to like September 1940? So that's great. And then I spent a lot of time thinking about how does this serve the narrative? And there's a lot of things that like I know a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into the page, and I know no one else will know, and I just kind of have to cry about that. There are a lot of
Right.
things that I desperately hope people will ask me on podcasts
Hmm.
and at Comic Cons, like the page where we see Hans's emergency kit. There was no standard emergency kit for the Luftwaffe at that time. It was just like
Hmm.
you're a pilot, don't get shot down.
Yeah.
But these guys were putting stuff together anyway, so I was like, okay, well, that means that I can't just look up what he would have in it. Yeah, now I got to see what this guy would put in his pack. So, that was like 3 weeks of research where I was like, okay, well, he's like, he can't get any currency because no one is going to exchange Deutschmarks or anything right now. So,
Yeah.
what is he going to do if he thinks he's going to be shot over England? Well, he's going to get a bunch of jewelry, which is things that he can like exchange. He's,
Yeah.
he's kind of a
It's
sentimental
gonna get
guy. He's got a
chocolate.
picture of
Yeah, yeah.
He's gonna get chocolate. He's gonna get his picture of him and his mom. He's got little mementos. He's got some rations. He has a first aid kit. He's got a flashlight. That flashlight really gave me a lot of grief because I had already sketched the page, and then I was like, I should look up what a World War II German flashlight looks like. Then I looked it
Yeah.
up. It looks nothing like what an American flashlight looks like. So it's this little clip-on thing that you can put on your backpack, it makes sense. You don't need a hand to hold it, but I was like, I have already sketched this. Now I gotta go into sketch
Yeah.
the whole thing. So you
Yeah.
just kind of got to accept that there's a lot that's not on the page. And if someone's interested, they'll ask. And if not, you'll just be sitting on the information of like weird German hunting cults that was very prevalent in the Luftwaffe. So that's coming in volume 2. And I'm excited. More of Hans being uncomfortable at parties. If you're into Hans being uncomfortable at parties, volume 2 is going to be amazing.
Okay. I saw that the posting dates were all like essentially kind of the same date. So I wasn't able to really figure out what sort of schedule you kept
Yeah.
yourself on.
So the website I like launched late. I moved stuff off of other websites when I created the new one. So most of the pages are uploaded on the same day. But I
Yeah.
would do once a week on Thursdays.
I was like, man, she's really quick. This stuff's all coming out.
God, no. But yeah, and I'm reworking my process now that I have an editor and I can't do what I did on the end of volume 1, which is take chapter 5 was supposed to be 32 pages long, and then it ended up being like 52 pages long because I just kept going like, it doesn't feel done. And when you're doing a webcomic, you can do that. And when I write prose, I was very much a like seat of pants person, like, let's see where this goes. You can't do that in comics, really. You do have to sort of partition out the information and like see where everything is going to go on a page because only so much information can go on a page, right? So I can't just do the absolutely unhinged things of like, all right, so on page 32, Hans and Reineke walk into a bar and somebody declares that, I don't know, if anyone can guess their name, they win 1,000,000 gold pieces. And Hans goes, I've seen a story like this before. Let me recount the entire tale of Rumpelstiltskin. And then Reineke, you can't do that. There's only so much information you can put on a page. And writing Sierra is still very much set in like, well, this will take me 8 pages tops. And art Sierra that comes in later after I've done the script is usually chain smoking cigarettes and like silent tears running down my face. So fortunately, my editor, Jenny Blank, is very kind and has given me a lot of freedom with this and says, yeah, your stuff. So, we're going to be flexible with deadlines. So I'm like, please don't say that.
Yeah.
Please don't say that. I need people
So
build supervision.
yeah. I need pressure
Copy.
prompting. That was my big word for 2022, figuring out what that is. It's
what is pressure prompting?
Pressure prompting.
I've never heard that before.
Is the feeling that you need to get something done because somebody else needs it. Right.
Yeah,
so like I wouldn't necessarily finish this article today rather than next week, but I promised my editor I'd get it to him. So I'm being pressure prompted to do this, or I have to go to work because I'm getting pressure prompted. If I don't, I'll get fired. Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna steal that.
Freely given because I stole it from somebody. So does writer Sierra write a script and finish it before artist Sierra takes over?
Yeah, so
Because
my basic
Mhm,
process is I do the script for the chapter and I break it into what I think are pages. And then I go and I sketch everything, all of the pages out to make sure that the information that I put in actually fits. My process is very flexible. I try and make sure
mhm,
that everything is changeable just in case until basically the inks and colors are on.
mhm,
I've had to redo a few pages with inks and colors and I hated it,
mhm.
but I did it. We all do
Yeah.
things that we don't like. Once I have everything scripted and everything laid out on the page, then I go through one page at a time because usually, I would be updating them. So I'd be making sure that everything is done in order. And I try and keep that because what I like to do sometimes is I'll change dialogue when I hit the page or I'll,
Mhm.
go, oh, actually, you know what? This is a cool side prompt that I really like including taxidermy on the walls of the bar made me end up going, you know what? Actually, this is something that Reinica would be really uncomfortable about. Like, she's
Yeah.
being perceived as an animal. There's animals all over the walls. Originally, I just intended it to look like a rustic bar, but now I'm like, this is a whole other level of like
You play
threatening
up
to her
that,
specifically. Yeah, so let's pump that up a little bit. So I try and make sure that things are consecutive so that I can build off of what I've got and
mhm.
any weird last second decisions that I decide to make. So,
It seems like you're working digitally.
yes.
Do you prefer working that way, or is that an outgrowth of just efficiency?
When I started doing comics in undergrad and piddling around with comics, I taught
Mhm.
myself how to draw basically with digital. So that is my most comfortable art form. It's the quickest way. That's the only way I do comics. I'm sure that someday I would like to try doing a comic traditionally, but
Mhm.
it scares the bejesus out of me. So all power to people who do that. It's not
Um,
me though.
w when you were at CCA, was there any track of maybe not making you use traditional media, or at least have sort of a comfort in traditional media, or were they basically trying to help you make your comics the best way that you know, and since you're comfortable with digital, we'll just sort of let you go that way?
Did somebody put you up to this question? Because it sounds like something that my inking professor would have paid you to say.
No.
Um, first semester, our inking professor, oh my god, and of course I can't remember his full name. Sorry, Chris. It's Chris Keeler. He's a phenomenal artist, a hilarious guy, and he would roast the living bejesus out of you. And that was the first time that I have, frankly, used anything other than a micron to
Mhm.
draw, and the first time I'd used a micron in like many years. But everything had to be done. We used nibs, we used brush pens. I discovered I really liked the brush pen, and I really hated the nib. And every time we had an assignment, we had to present something. Everything had a theme, and he was always the professor who would give you exactly what he thought about anything, regardless of what it was. So I was sort of feeling at the same time the sensitivity of, ooh, this is not my strong suit, and the desire to get better so that I could impress someone who clearly, wasn't giving anyone
Mhm.
anything to believe in. So I actually did a portrait of Reinica for one of the assignments where we had to do a cross-hatching micron
Ooh.
assignment, technical pen. The assignment was draw a character who looks like they should be on a dollar bill, and I went all out. I destroyed like 7 pens doing portrait of Reinica, and I
Mhm.
like did all of her like hair and like, made sure that I did everything. And the highest compliment I got in that class was him saying, "You know what? I really wouldn't change anything about this." And I was like, "Yes, yeah!" Chris Kohler, that's his name. And I was so stoked
Oh,
about that. I've been riding that high ever since. But yeah, he really taught me how to do traditional inks. I enjoy doing them. I just feel like doing traditional art is sort of my happy place now. It's there where
okay.
I don't have deadlines and I can do fine art stuff on the side. I am affiliated with the Torpedo Factory here in Alexandria, which is fun.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's nice to have that separation of digital art being for fun, comics, and then knowing that traditional art is for me and fun and exploring things. And there's definitely times where I can pick up something that I do with traditional media and go, oh, I should try doing this digitally or vice versa. And it's fun to have that
Mhm.
conversation. But if you're like, yes, I would like to buy an original Hans Vogel comic page, I will, with tears
Print one
streaming
out
down my
for you,
cheeks.
and,
Yeah. I
gladly
have
take
been
your money.
thinking about doing like so as our other professors, of course, now I can't remember anyone's Ed Luce. Of course, Ed Luce.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wubbable Loaf.
Yeah, Well Below. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
great. I love Ed. But Ed was saying that sometimes what he does is he sketches things digitally and then prints it out and then inks it over traditionally. So I might do some of the pages like that, but not with any planes because that's hard.
I get a chance to talk to a fair amount of artists on this show, and I'm always
No
interested
way.
in the divide between artists who prefer penciling and artists who prefer inking, where their happy place is. Some of them prefer the penciling because that's the problem solving stuff, and then the inking is perfunctory. And then there are others, the pencils are just there, and it's the inking that's the actual drawing, that's what they really love doing. I'm assuming with digital stuff, it's kind of a combination, but do you get more enjoyment out of the execution of the story that you've broken down, or in breaking that story down onto a page?
I think I enjoy the layout and sketches more than I enjoy inking because it feels to me that that's the storytelling element. That's where all the, you said the problem solving goes. That's I get to figure out. Also, I have the best expressions when I'm like doing them in 10 seconds. And so I always make myself laugh whenever I draw a really stupid face. The inking for me, it takes forever. And there's constant battle trying to stop myself from being a perfectionist. Yeah, I would have to go with the earlier process. But of course, sometimes the penciling is hard because I don't like it because it's hard to think. And sometimes I'm just like, ugh, I just want this to be on the page already. And then the inking can be a little zen because I don't actually have to think about it. I can like put my music on and zone out or listen to my podcasts and just be doing stuff and get lost on something fun.
I swear I'm not trying to ask questions about every aspect of comics that you may not absolutely enjoy. I can't let you go without asking about the lettering.
The lettering that's on the website is not the lettering that's in the final book. Yes. That is a placeholder. Did you get the final?
I did see some of the previews of the Dark Horse, and I'm like, oh, those look really good. Let me amend my earlier statement to say that when I'm looking at the lettering,
really sad.
No, it's good. I can look at the lettering and I'm seeing the font, but I'm also seeing the placement choices. You do the overlapping balloons, thing, which I love. I love when cartoonists are able to do that. So it was the font choice that I was like, that's a little rough. That's a choice.
Yeah, everyone, Ed was the only one who supported me on that. Shout out to Ed Luce. Everyone else was like, oh, I don't know. And Ed was like, yeah, no, the serifs look really dignified. It looks like a novel. And I was like, thank you, Ed. But eventually everyone else won out. So when I got picked up by Cast Iron Lizzie, who's the editor, was like, so the font. And I was like, yeah, I know. But at that point, there's a publisher picking it up. When I'm putting out a free webcomic, it's like, look, okay, what do you want me to do? Go back and reletter it. But when someone
pay
is
my
actually
rent,
like,
you can make
then I'm like,
you can make the choice. And you're like, oh, there's a check. Oh shit, I guess I should actually.
So Mel Gilman, another professor I had, was like, your handwriting is always going to be the best match for your art. And dang it, they were right. So of course I did like a 4 or 8 page test. Actually, it was the conversation with Brynhilder was my lettering test. And as I was doing it, I was like, dang, this looks so much better. Like, oh, yeah, this is going to be good. And I like it because you can work in more personality, you can work in more information with hand lettering than you can with fonts. So as much as it's a pain, I'm coming around to it. I'm certainly still learning, but I enjoy doing things like at one point Fritz is being sarcastic and he speaks in cursive and little things where I get to have Hans trail off and you can make the letters all shaky, and it's fun to add another level of weirdness.
It's another level of cartooning, and that is another something this show has taught me, especially when you have a cartoonist who's in control of everything. As cartoonists like Stan Sakai, although Stan Sakai is a whole nother he's a whole other level. But the things that you can do with it, integrating it into the story more, but also like with the handwriting and being able to do, if I can make a recommendation, as we were talking about this, I was reminded of Barry Windsor Smith's Monsters. If you haven't read that, it's an amazing graphic novel. I mean, it is a magnum opus. His lettering, absolutely fascinating. The balloon placements, how he uses the balloons to drag your eye across the page and through the page. His use of fonts. A lot of the book takes place during World War II, and they're speaking in different languages. He uses a very specific hand lettered serif almost Gothic sort of font for when the Germans are speaking German versus English and think. I mean, so good.
It's on my list now.
It's also something where he'll have somebody's shouting and rambling, and the balloon is like a certain size. He's doing this analog, but it's like he's digitally has the text has increased the font like twice as much. So it's the balloon is cutting
so it's like
off
out
the
of
thing.
frame.
Yeah. But you're just seeing like a circle of a larger sort of spiel going on. I was like, that is.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, so I guess everyone can take a drink. That's my Barry Windsor Smith Monsters plug.
It's sort of one of the things that I find really interesting is the issue of how to convey other languages, especially other languages that not necessarily your reader is supposed to understand, and the level available. I put a lot of German into Hans Vogel because obviously all the characters are German. And dialect is also a huge issue because one of the first things that happened to me in Austria is I went into a bakery and I asked for a Brötchen, which is like a little bread roll. But that is not the dialect word for bread rolls in Upper Austria. And the baker kind of rushed me off because I did not use the correct word. The correct word is Semmel, but I did not know that. And it was like my second day in Austria. And I never went back to that bakery again because I was utterly humiliated and I felt really bad. There were other bakeries, it was fine. But the power of dialect and how much of a reminder that, like, yeah, okay, Germany might be a country and Austria might be a country, but there are all of these thriving mini cultures that are still surviving in these languages I thought that was important to include. So Hans speaks Hochdeutsch, but he's constantly running into people who are not. The innkeeper speaks Mürschidlisch, which is the dialect of Upper Austria where I was living. And Reineke has her own dialect, which is a little bit of a spoiler, trying to work in enough words that it can establish if you know what the dialect is, but not too much to sort of alienate English-speaking readers is always a game. Because ideally, I would love for people to be learning at least a little German reading these books, or, learning there's other languages that will be happening later in the books. Spoilers. But yeah, I mean that's a whole other issue with lettering. And one of the things that I'm like very smug about is that now that I'm hand lettering, I don't have to find a Cyrillic font. So
Yeah. Speaking of the different languages and the translations that you have in there, it reminded me of something about reading the webcomic itself. Each one of the pages has a caption or a note at the bottom of it. So you either are translating German that's being spoken there, but you always have like an author comment. And that is an interesting experience. Is there a thought to replicating that experience in the printed edition?
Yes. So at the end of every chapter, there is a section for notes and translations. So those are still very much in there. Unfortunately, I can't do that on the end of every page. That is one of the things that I love about webcomics is that after every page, I can be like, yeah, look at this loser, haha, which I do a lot because Hans is the loser, and he's my very special boy, but he's a loser. I can roast him in the comments if I want, but in the books, I can only roast him at the end of the chapter. Which is very sad because one of the things that I enjoy about reading webcomics is having that immediacy, like the delayed gratification of the joke, which happens sometimes in translations when like you read a meme in another language and then you see what the translation is and you're like, that's funny. But it wouldn't necessarily be as funny if you immediately understood it. It's that moment of confusion. I think that sort of applies also with the comment section in webcomics where you read the comic and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then you look down and you see whatever the author's note is. And then you're like, that's funny. That's right. I agree.
Like going into one of the houses, I guess, before he's met Reineke and the, let's say, the moody setting that he's in, you're like, oh, that's not creepy at all. Or,
yeah, it's fine.
Those sort of things gives the reader a different experience and in some ways, more personal one with the work, because you're almost sitting there with the reader as they're reading the comic. And that is an attractive aspect to that sort of storytelling.
Yeah, I'm very glad that Dark Horse is letting me continue to upload it as a webcomic. Obviously, there will be delay, but one, I just think that it's a great way to get the word out there. And thankfully, people don't seem to be discouraged at all from getting it. I mean, if people like it, they usually want to have the hard copy. But the other thing is that I enjoy the fact that it's out there and available. And it really does encourage that idea of having a conversation. I love it when people comment on the pages that are happening. I love it when people are invested in it. And I enjoy the idea of that conversation happening around the story as it's being told.
So this is an idea that you have had in your head, obviously, for years. What has been the key to keep it fresh?
The thing about the history that I'm discovering is that I always feel like I never know enough. There's always something new to discover. In 2020, it was like April, the week before I was getting married. I was out with a migraine and I found a podcast on YouTube, World War II TB, Dr. Philip Blood, which incredible name. He was giving a talk about hunting culture in the Luftwaffe in Poland in the late 30s, early 40s. I was out, just a little ice pack on my face, not able to do anything. And I listened to, I think it's like an hour and a half, utterly entranced. I was like, oh my God, my like brain was just expand, my mind was expanding. I couldn't even look at a screen, but I like dragged myself to my computer and wrote an email to my agent. I was like, okay, I just was listening to this thing and I'm totally inspired. And it's
Mm.
crazy, but we're gonna, volume two, we're gonna have all of these things, and there's gonna be deer and hunting culture, and it's crazy, and colonialism, and the World War II is the colonial German export, and just completely unhinged, just like absolutely. I'm sure I made like zero sense, but there's so many just like weird, like real life history things that line up weirdly perfectly with fairy tale themes that whenever I find them, it's just like a little jolt of adrenaline. It's just like, ooh, this is wild and crazy and perfectly fits in. There's little themes that I'll find out in the wild places, and sometimes it clicks in a way that's exciting. And the rest of it is just being too dumb to quit. Yeah, like at some point you're just like, yeah,
I prefer to use the word persistent.
yeah, whatever character trait I have, it's the one where I just get an idea in my head. I actually had been scouted by Dark Horse in 2018.
Mhm.
They ended up not picking me up then for various reasons. It was a 6 month process. I was super bummed, understandably, afterward. And a few of my friends were like, at the time, like, oh, like we're really sorry to hear that. And sometimes you can just like Hans will always be there, and it's a good like just treat it as like a portfolio, as like a resume. You don't have to like finish it if you don't want to. And bless them, they're very sweet. It was sort of the exact opposite of what I wanted to hear, and did at the time kind of go off on them. But frankly, that little bit of spite was certainly enough for me to go, God,
Yeah. I
yeah,
can't remember who it was I was talking to on the show. It might have been Spike Trotman of Iron Circus,
yeah,
where I was like, "Is spite a good enough reason to get up in the morning?" And she was like, "Yes.
yeah,
Yes, 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 yes."
yeah.
Why do you think comics are uniquely positioned for nonfiction, or specifically history?
I've got like reasons on reasons. And the first of which is that it's very approachable. I've read a lot of great nonfiction that I know if I wasn't having my very specific kind of brain rot, I wouldn't be into. And accessibility is something that I know a lot of people talk about with regards to graphic novels. So that is sort of the easy answer. But I do think in other ways, one of the reasons that I really like comics as a way to tell history is that I do think that seeing history in a new way increases empathy toward the past, and that's something that I think is something that is very important to me as like a historian and a storyteller, as someone who wants to tell history to people. I think that it's very easy to sort of see history as a series of static images, and especially the earlier you go, the less images there are, and the more you're sort of using your imagination. But I think that comics have this capacity to bring history to life in a way that's really engaging and really fun. And if I got to see another stupid movie in some of the Middle Ages where everyone is wearing like the same gray outfits, like, please, God, movies aren't doing it. All right, I gotta make
Mhm,
someone out there needs to do a comic about the Landsknecht and all of their insane outfit glory. And if I gotta do it myself, I gotta do it myself. Because
mhm,
I think the other thing is that, frankly, comics are able to be a one man show. And if you are just intensely passionate about a very specific area of history, you can just make a comic about that. You don't need the budget of a Hollywood movie. You can just
mhm.
go out there and tell people about the marvels of the 12th century Mongolian imperial court.
Yeah.
And if you want
Yeah.
to do that, call me. Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked with Mike about this, and I can't remember what book it was specifically we were referring to, but reading history, is wonderful. But if it's prose, after a while, there's going to be a certain amount of things you're just not going to be able to visualize. And the author may not take the time to really flesh out what that particular thing is. I think one of the reasons why people gravitate towards historical movies versus the prose, because it does almost literally immerse you into that world. You can see it. You don't have to know what a Rolodex is. There it is. Like you can sort of
yeah.
it is. Comics also combine that visual immersion with the breadth of prose, of you being able to take it at your own pace and zoom in and zoom out from the storytelling standpoint. So something like Age of Bronze or Berlin, or
oh, I love
stuff
Berlin.
like that does not surprise me. In your work, one of the my sort of takeaways from it is I love the beat of, Hans has gone from our world to this other world. He is walking around with a piece of the airplane on his back that he's made into a shield, and it's the griffin on there. So here you have this early 20th century flight jacket, and he's carrying kind of a medieval shield with this griffin on it. And it's interesting that you picked the griffin rather than like the Iron Cross sort of part of it. So here is Hans arming himself with the romantic of the plane rather than the nationalist part of it.
It's a squad, right? That's a squad symbol. He's trying to carry his friends, literally. He thinks that if he can get to a powerful enough place, he'll be able to take care of everyone that he needs to take care of. And that's one of the ideas that he kind of has to let go of in this. And his first thought when he is having this panic attack on the Valkyrie is like, yeah, you kind of suck, dude, is to be like, oh my God, where are my friends? Like, are they going to die too? Like, he's constantly got this part of his brain that's registering, where's Uli? Where's Fritz? Like, where are they? And all of these three kids are emotionally managing each other in increasingly unhealthy ways as they get sent to literal war. And he has this part of the unhealthy mechanisms that he has to unlearn. But also, I think the potential for him to get better is in that concern that he has for other people and that like connection that he desperately wants to build with people. I mean, he meets a talking fox in the forest, and the first thing he does isn't being like, well, that's weird, time to move on. He stops to help. And I think that's like fundamentally where he can start being a better person.
That echoes a scene. Shoot, the chronology in my head's a little off. I don't know if it's before or after, but him and his father and the veteran, where he was going to help this person, and his father, aka the state, whatever, is like, no, you do not do that. And sort of once he's away from those influences, he has the potential to be maybe not a tool of the fascist state. And you're like, oh, good, look at him doing something nice.
Earlier in the book, we see him when he is in front of the Konditorei, the cafe, the sweets shop. He's in trouble for feeding the pigeons because he gave his food to the pigeons because he thought that they were hungry.
And Dad was like,
Dad
"No,
says,
son.
no, you don't eat," which is, a hell of a lesson to learn. And it certainly is a hard time to be living in. But baby Hans is still like, yeah, well. Also, his pants are fixed with 100 Reichsmark. He has a patch on his pants, and there's money sewn into his pants.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see that more. He was dirt poor growing up. Hans is definitely the poorest out of all of his friends. And he grows up literally wearing his dad's military uniforms that have been tailored for him. So he gets a costume change in volume 2, and it's literally the first time that he hasn't been in a military uniform basically in his life. And that's, it's like a bunch of little, who is he without the state, without the military, without the Hitler Youth, without his dad, without his friends, and he can't be a fighter pilot, he can't be a Nazi anymore. What is there better to become?
Anything, but
literally anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's all up from there, but it's
it's all up from here. Don't screw this up, buddy.
It's all up from there. I should probably stop there, but I have one more question that I feel like I can't let the conversation end without throwing this little hot take grenade out there.
All right.
Walt Disney, threat or menace?
Oh.
So the mouse has popularized the Brothers Grimm works, has made a lot of these folktales household names, I guess that's the way to describe them. But then once they were brought to the screen by Walt and his Imagineers, they have become indelibly put into public consciousness. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or I'm assuming it's a little bit of both. How did the scales end up in
So
your
Walt
head for
can
that?
meet me in the pit as well.
Walt and Wagner.
Walt
You
and
do.
Wagner, I can take them.
Yeah.
But I had family who worked for Disney, so I think on one hand, I certainly grew up with Disney. We went to Disneyland. I, lived in Southern California. We went to Disneyland, the whole thing. But in my cynical old age, I've moved away from the mouse. I think ultimately, Disney is a menace to society, and the mouse is it's a bad thing for society. But I think that Disney's adaptation of German folklore, it didn't feel like a specific pick. I mean, he was looking for stories out of copyright, and folklore is certainly part of that. Taking a story that's out of copyright and making a story and then copywriting it is kind of a dick move.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much you can do. On the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty ballsy to take a German fairy tale when the Nazis are like right there and then make an Oscar-winning movie out of it and being like, screw you, man. And Hitler didn't like it, so I think that that's like a point for Snow White. But on the other hand, I think that it's a contribution to folklore. Certainly, it is an adaptation of it. I don't like that it's been used to create a bajillion-dollar media empire.
Juggernaut.
I enjoy getting a little tipsy and roasting fairy tale adaptations, except for Sleeping Beauty. I love that movie. That movie is the best.
That was actually going to be a bit of a follow-up. If there was sort of your favorite or a Disney adaptation that you would rate highest versus the one that could specifically die in a fire.
Hands down, Sleeping Beauty, the original. The art style is incredible. I love the stylization. I rewatched it recently to make sure that it wasn't like horrible, and it was great. I was very pleasantly surprised. I think visually it's one of my favorite Disney movies. I also really like Mulan. We love musicals and kicking ass. It's great. Ones that can die in a fire, basically all of the live action remakes.
Well, yeah.
That goes without saying.
Do you have a particular non-Disney fairy tale adaptation that you think is either very highly rated of you or is criminally underrated?
So I'm a big fan of Ukrainian and Soviet animation from the Soyuz Multfilm. I say Soviet because a lot of these animators are not Russian. They belong to the various other Eastern Bloc states. But the Soyuz Multfilm, Snow Queen is just top tier.
Okay.
Just visually stunning. There's a whole TV series that was shown in Hungary, and it's all on YouTube now, of Hungarian fairy tales that are incredibly charmingly animated, and I desperately love all of them. One of my favorite fairy tales is the Stone Soup, and their animated version of the Stone Soup I think is just so charming.
Okay.
This is my outside of Western Europe picks.
Any particular comics adaptations or inspirations of folktales? An easy question, I'm sure.
Oh man, I did recently pick up volumes 1 and 2 of Gamayun Tales, which are a collection of Russian
going to
folklore.
mention that.
Very good. I'm very enjoying it.
Yes.
I think that's my favorite. Most of my fairy tale collections are prose. I have my extremely worn copy of the first edition Brothers Grimm in German that I reference constantly. It's full of notes. I should get a new hardcover that looks nice, but I don't have it. And I have a lot of other... I love getting German editions of fairy tale collections because I like to see the various ways that they've been recorded, because the Brothers Grimm recorded them all phonetically in dialect because there was no standardized spelling of German at that time. So a lot of the stories, I just have to sound them out, which is a real pain. So I do enjoy getting a translation, especially for the ones in Bavarian dialect, which, sorry to my friends in Bavaria, but you guys are a little unintelligible sometimes.
It's a
Sorry.
little tough. That's all I'm saying.
It's a little, yeah.
It's not you, it's me, but you're not doing me any
Yeah.
favors by being
There
unintelligible.
were a few times when I was like, you enjoy a nice German beer or two or three
Mm-hmm.
or several, and someone comes up to you speaking Bäuerisch, and it was late. I had stuff to drink, and I was overcome with the fact that I had a degree in German studies and I had no idea what this guy was saying. And I remembered that I had written like a 25-page paper about Goethe's Faust, and I still had no idea what this guy was saying, and I started crying. So, Bäuerisch makes me emotional, but in like an existential way.
Yeah. Favorite movie to roast as a historian?
Oh my God. Oh man, that's such a hard question.
I mean, so are you able to turn off your brain for most historical movies? Is it only
Oh
sort of historical
no.
movies set within a certain period that your brain kicks in, or is it
No,
like
this is just how I enjoy movies
anything?
now.
Okay. Do you
I
really enjoy
I
them as
I
you do
love
that?
like it's like a little
Okay.
Rubik's cube. Like I enjoy sort of like extrapolating things.
Yeah.
Not a history movie, but the Christmas Prince movies on Netflix. I had so much fun with them because the implication of all of these like royal Hallmark Christmas movies is that they're all of these little kingdoms spread out in Europe, and sometimes they're dumb enough to give me a map of where they are. And then I can be like, okay, why is this like English speaking British accented royal family in the middle of the Balkans? And then I get to like
Right.
have my little way and grab my poor partner is probably like thank God he is also into history, because I think he
Oh,
would have
good.
been very done with me by this point.
Yeah.
I mean, World War II movies in general, like that terrible Pearl Harbor movie with what's his
Affleck
face?
and
Yeah. It's just like,
yeah.
oh man, this is so much, guys.
Do you have one that avoids most of the slings and arrows?
Um,
Let's say World War II. Like you're like, I need to watch a World War II movie that I can actually enjoy and get behind.
Oh man, I don't. All of the war movies that I think are good are not fun to watch. I don't think war is good. I mean, I haven't seen the new All Quiet on the Western Front yet. But I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. But the American one that came out in like 1930, I really enjoyed. The classic. I enjoyed 1917. That was a good movie. The sequence where he's running through the bombed out city with flares going up around him. The sort of weird surrealist war critique is very much my jam. So I was furiously scribbling notes. Downfall is a classic. My like extremely petty grievance is seeing the end scene turned into that meme of Hitler yelling. Because when you understand German, you're like hearing him like just completely breaking down, and then they have like whatever random English on it. And I was like, this is like real things. I know it's like super petty, but that's my petty thing. Of course, come and see Iti Смотри, a Russian film about World War II and Ivan's childhood, two devastating Soviet films about World War II, which I think are very well made, very good. Good with an asterisk, like definitely messed up because it's a war movie. I mean, the war movies coming out of Europe were certainly a different flavor than the war movies coming out of America after World War II. You can tell.
Yeah, the one sort of, I would say fun. I mean, it is sort of fun. Or the most interesting World War II movie that I keep forgetting about and then being reminded of was one that I saw early called Victory or Escape to Victory. If you were to mash up The Great Escape with a soccer movie starring Michael Caine, Max von Sydow, Pele, and Sylvester Stallone in 1980, directed by John Huston. This movie is fantastic. Max von Sydow playing possibly the only Nazi you wouldn't send right to the Nuremberg.
Immediately, okay.
Because it's sort of based on a true story. And essentially, the Nazis set up this football match between the German national team and a team built out of prisoners of war from like Luftwaffe camps and stuff. So you've got a whole bunch of real footballers of the time sort of making up these players. And Michael Caine is sort of the older captain of the team. It's interesting watching them play. You can do full screen shots of the actual footballers doing head to toe footwork and all this stuff. It cuts to Michael Caine chest up, jogging and like doing the like go go go. You're like, okay, he's clearly not. He's clearly not doing it. And Max von Sydow is the camp commandant who helps organize this. I'm pretty sure he's like Luftwaffe as well, but he was either a football fan or he had played some himself. So it's that like, oh, he's a nobleman, right? When something really, really good happens at the end of the movie for the Allied team, the stadium that they're playing in erupts in applause. He's like the one Nazi who immediately like stands up, is like clapping, and he's looking at the English guys. And he's like, fantastic, fantastic. Blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, okay.
He's a good
Max von Sydow was like, all right, we'll just put you on house arrest. That's fine.
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
else, but it's
I do love
again,
Max von Sydow. He's great.
Yeah, like you've got Great Escape stuff. You've got Sylvester Stallone right after Rocky 2-ish playing the American who's like, hey, I can do football. And he's like running into people and stuff. And they're like, no, you like, he is so obnoxious purposely, but he really is actually obnoxious. But everyone else in the movie is fantastic. Pele, obviously sort of past his playing days. And John Huston, obviously, super legendary director, knows how to shoot this soccer game. It's like maybe, I don't want to say the only soccer game I've ever seen in toto, but he really makes it work. And one of the beauties of this thing is Pele scores a goal on a bicycle kick. That instead of seeing these things from your sports TV or overhead angles or whatever, it's John Huston directing a sequence of Pele scoring on Nazis with a bicycle kick. You're like, sold.
I mean, yeah, absolutely, 100%. I'm in.
Sold.
Love
and
it.
score by Bill Conti. So it's like Rocky type of score. It's oh man, I saw that movie when I was like 4, and every 5 to 10 years it sort of pops back up on my thing. I think Warner Brothers actually just put out a Blu-ray of it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, so it's actually available in a widescreen.
So go find it. Yeah.
In America, it was called Victory, and in Europe, it was Escape to Victory.
Yeah,
it's oh god,
I'll have to look it up.
I mean, it's not winning any Academy Awards. But
you can have the weird little movies that you're passionate about. I mean, I saw Time Bandits as a kid, and that movie fundamentally altered my personality. Yes. And then I have to explain to people why I am the way I am, and I'm just like, I was exposed to Terry Gilliam as a small child.
Yes. Yeah, my girlfriend and I love that movie. That was one of the bonding things that we had. It's
the best.
Yeah. I need fruit.
We were all traumatized as children when I was watching it, and he meets Agamemnon, and then he wants to, like, Agamemnon's going to be his dad, and then everyone kidnaps him again. It's messed up.
Yeah.
I wanted Sean Connery to be my dad so bad. Yeah. It's like, I just want to go back in time and be adopted.
Yeah. But then at the end, you've got like tanks and cowboys and lasers and evil. And,
oh my God. Yeah. And that last fight sequence was just genuinely messed me up. That scene made me so desperately sad as a child, like watching all of the friends you made through history just get obliterated by evil. I would like that. Deeply impacted me.
Like all the best children's stories or folk tales is teaches you maybe a lesson, and it's also scary as hell, which is kind of necessary.
Everyone's saying that kids need to be protected from some stuff, but kids like to be scared. Kids like to be grossed out. I just ran a zine workshop yesterday, and one of the kids made a zine about an undead guy who like usurps the throne from a king, and I was like, this is awesome. And he was like, you can tell the undead guy because he's got his eyes crossed out, and I was like, hell yeah, kid, yeah, you can. And like that's like the
awesome. Future, like, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I get a lot of, like the Pope telling the Brothers Grimm, like, oh, well, this stuff is kind of, I don't know if this is okay for kids. Kids love that stuff. Kids love telling me about, like, well, I read the original, but the only person who can say that, what the original Brothers Grimm are people like ages 12 and below, because I'm like, yeah, your mind is being blown right now that people get to die in fairy tales because your mom only lets you watch Snow White. And now you get to know about stuff, and that's rad, kid. Tell me all about it. I'm not going to tell you I have a degree in this. You don't care about that. You just want to tell me about the stepsisters dancing with their messed up shoes. And that's awesome. Absolutely. It's gnarly. Tell me more.
Nice. Oh, That is fantastic. Sierra, thank you so much for taking a rather large chunk of your Sunday to talk about all of this. This is
My God, yeah.
It's been fun.
This was a ton of fun. I hope you had like a fraction of the amount of fun that I had. Thank you so much for inviting me on and letting me ramble at you for like 2 hours.
No, Well, there you have it, folks. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you're given the opportunity to do so. It helps more people find out about us, and we would all greatly appreciate it. So until we meet again, hopefully soon, my name is Greg. Stay safe, keep enjoying those funny books, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Systems disengaged.